guys, welcome to another video. So today I'm up to the point where I'm going to be describing the character and the personality traits of the zodiac sign of Scorpio. Now this is actually probably going to be quite a complicated one to explain, just because of the very nature of the sign that is the topic of this character description video, being that the sign is Scorpio, obviously, that we're talking about today. And they are a very complicated sign, not like Gemini or Pisces in the sense of it's complicated because there's two different personalities, two different sides, because that's not the case with Scorpio. More with Scorpio, it's because one, they're ruled by two planets instead of one, and two, they just have this very secretive, sort of subtle aura about them. They don't reveal a lot of their true passion to the outside world, and I think that's what makes them intriguing to a lot of people, but also off-putting and intimidating to a lot of other people. And that also is what adds this complexity, this layer of complexity, I think, to their sign. So we'll get on with this straight away. So Scorpio, they are the fixed mode for the element of water in astrology. So if we think back to my Cancer explanation video, if you watch that, that is the cardinal water sign. They're the one who kicks off the water element in astrology. They first introduced the water element, in other words, the more emotional nature, to the heavens, to the zodiac, and they produce this, they coordinate this in key life moments. When they need this energy, they stop being neutral and they will coordinate this water actively. So then Scorpio comes along next in the water triad, and they are the one who will make the energy of water a little bit more grounded, a bit more down to earth, a bit more sort of reserved maybe and serious, and they will stabilize it, persevere it. They'll stop it from burning out, or fading away. More accurately, drying out would be most accurate in the case of water, because obviously they're a water sign. So it's going to stop it drying out. It's going to keep this water fresh. It's going to keep it available. It's persevering. It's the most reliable, also the most stubborn and unmovable form of the water element in astrology, because it is the fixed sign for water. So that's the first thing to bear in mind about Scorpio. So first thing about the Scorpio is that they're ruled by two different signs, two different planets, sorry, and I think it's because when these astrology was first discovered, they hadn't yet discovered actually all the planets in the solar system with astronomy, which of course is still very intricately linked to astrology, because it's the belief that all the planets you can observe in astronomy and their positions influence your life and give you character traits and all of these specific things. So of course they're very interwoven. So because of that, it's kind of like, at the time in astronomy, they hadn't even discovered all of the planets in our solar system. Therefore, astrology it originally sort of had one sign for each planet, and then because there was too many signs, they kind of gave, two signs to the same planetary ruler, if you like. So that's kind of how it came out. So at first, now Scorpio, it's considered to be ruled by the planets of both Mars and Pluto, and at the time of the astrology, being mainstream and getting started, widespread, and all of that, they believed that Mars was the planet that ruled both the Aries and the Scorpio. It was not until later, when that had already been circulated, that they discovered Pluto, which obviously now we know Pluto technically is not a planet, it's a dwarf planet because it's too small. But at the time they thought it was a planet, plus it doesn't really matter because in astrology the sun and moon are even considered planets. So they then attributed Pluto, when they discovered it, to Scorpio instead of Mars. So now Scorpio is ruled by both planets, Mars and Pluto. So first we'll touch on the side of them which is ruled by Mars. So the side of them ruled by Mars is obviously going to be a little bit more similar to the Aries character, because obviously Aries is also ruled by Mars. Scorpio, I'd say, is a more complicated sign than Aries, because they do also have this Pluto rulership in addition. Instead of just Aries having Mars on its own, Scorpio has Mars with Pluto co-ruler. So that makes them a bit more complicated, I think, for that reason. But yeah, so Mars. Now, the Scorpio, the side of them that's ruled by Mars, they are similar to Aries in that they have this active pioneering spirit. They have this warrior sort of mentality, same as Aries, because Mars is the planet of aggression, it's masculine sexuality, it's physical energy, courage, bravery, this sort of fighting, active, pioneering spirit. They like challenges. They like to push themselves as much as they can to achieve new things. Trailblazer sort of thing. That is Mars. And because Scorpio and Aries both have this Mars rulership in common, they both have these character traits that they share with each other. Um, Pluto side of Scorpio, though, that comes in to make them distinctive from Aries, and obviously also the fact that their elements are essentially opposite, and that Aries is fire, Scorpio is water. So the Pluto is considered to be like, honestly, guys, quite a bad planet. Like Pluto is meant to signify hell. It's meant to kind of signify death. But on the more positive side, it signifies death in order to be reborn, if you like. And resurrection, regeneration, reborn, rejuvenation, these are all key words that would describe the Scorpio character in a nutshell. It's like they want to transform themselves multiple times throughout their lives, but in a very intense way. And Pluto is about transformation, rebirth, resurrection as a different person. These sort of very dark but also deep spiritual themes are very much represented by the planet of Pluto in astrology. Now, Pluto is a water planet as well. It's very it's very dark. Like it represents also the eighth house along with the Scorpio. So the eighth house in astrology is traditionally the house of suffering. It's the house of pain. It's sort of not a nice house, but when you come out the other side of those challenges that it throws at you, the end result is that you're a much better person than you were before those challenges. So it's like transformation through hardship, if you like. And it says that sort of theme with Uranus as well, the planet Uranus, which is like liberation through hardship. But it's more that Uranus is more on a worldly level. It's more about the whole society as a whole and them transforming into a better version. But in that process, it is hardship. It's not easy to get to that transformation. Pluto's similar, but it's more on a personal level rather than a humanitarian level. Pluto's more about this deep personal, almost like your soul is suffering and then it's rejuvenating, it's coming out a better version. But the process is hard. So that's kind of themes of Pluto. Pluto has a very there's kind of a cloudiness similar to Neptune in a certain sense. There's this mysterious aura about Pluto, which is also about secrets and keeping things hidden. This is also why Scorpio is a very secretive zodiac sign, is because they keep a lot of things to themselves due to Pluto. They have this connection with hell, with the other world because of Pluto, but they also have a deeper understanding of human nature than probably any other sign. And the reason for that is because they have this connection with the deeper almost the whole internal soul of mankind. They don't judge, as I said in the judgmental video, because they kind of know that, there's darker aspects to human nature and they're intuitively in tune with these sort of things kind of within their subconscious mind. So it doesn't really shock them. It definitely doesn't scare them that much. They're very brave, they're very courageous, and they channel this through the Mars energy too, because they're also ruled by Mars. Um, but they do it in a much more private, reserved way than Aries, because also Aries, because they're the cardinal fire sign, they are very outward with everything. Their whole energy is very outward. Mars, for Scorpio side, the water side of Mars, it's more under wraps. It's just as intense, in fact, probably more intense than Aries. But that coupled with the fact that it's a water sign and it's co-ruling with Pluto, it makes it much more restrained. It's more internal, probably stronger in its emotional intensity because it is a water expression, but it is more less obvious on the outside. It's more what you feel on the inside at your core because it is water. And it's mixed with Pluto, which is this sense of mystery and intrigue sort of thing. So, first thing to say about Scorpio, it makes them very intense. Can be very possessive in love. They are very controlling, but they are very, very psychic, very intuitive. As I said in the Cancer video, if you watch that one, all the water signs in common have this in common, that they all have this intuition, and it's so accurate and so strong that it borders on literally psychic abilities at times. And I have Cancer and Pisces in prominent placements, so I know what this water element intuition is like because I have it too very strongly. And water signs are about emotion and heart over logic and head primarily. They don't listen to the logical side of it. They listen to what they want to. Like it's what they want to do. Does it give them a positive or a negative gut feeling? And if it's negative gut feeling, even if there's no logical reason for it, they will not do it because their heart's not in it. And that's definitely more Cancer because they're the one coordinating water, but Scorpio has this too, which is probably also why they have the secretive element to them as well, is that they hold a lot back because they will only do what they feel is the right course of action. And they're also the most stubborn in this and the least adaptable in this attitude because they are the fixed water sign. And the water is always there, but it's also not a mutable sign, so it's not changing like Pisces either. So it's very static, as static as water can be, I guess you could say. A real world example I would liken Scorpio to then, there's two different sides, as I say. Scorpio are very friendly, very warm hearted people, but I think at their core as well, they get this really like kind of a bad reputation. But I think at their core, they're actually not as mean, malicious, and spiteful as people think they are, as the, stereotype. I think they're actually very kind people, but the thing is that they are so secretive that they would never show that unless you truly are willing to see that side of them and have that side of them pushed, out of them and towards you. But I do think I don't think they deserve the evil stereotype that their sign normally gets at all. But it's mainly because they're so secretive that I think people think that they have bad intentions. But the thing is, when you do piss them off and cross them, that's when they show the more evil side of them. They're very vengeful. They are probably the most likely to get revenge out of any sign, least likely to forgive and forget. And even if they forgive you, they will never forget it. But that's the same with all water signs. But they're least forgiving, I would say. Like they are, quite nasty if you annoy them. One reason being that obviously they have Mars rulership. But I would say Pluto is the major ruler of Scorpio, and Mars is the minor secondary ruler of Scorpio. So they are influenced by Pluto more than Mars, but they do have both co-ruling them at the same time, as I said at the start of the video. So they are very vengeful if crossed, but also because they're not very open about what they think or what they feel, they are quite sneaky about that, and they are very good at getting revenge and hitting you exactly where it hurts. But if you don't annoy them or piss them off or cross them in any way, they're quite nice people, and they are very mysterious, but they do also know how to present this image of bubbly, happy, friendly, sociable sort of vibe to the world. They do know how to present that in social situations. They do know how to kind of act less deep and emotional than they actually are in public. So, like, say you're doing a get together with friends and it's quite casual, it's not really the place to have this deep emotional sort of almost pessimistic, somber sort of air. You want it to be light, breezy, that sort of thing. They know that, and they know how to pretend to be more light and carefree than they actually are in those situations in order that everyone will still like them. So they don't change and they're definitely not fake, but they do know how to appear to be more carefree than they actually are in public. They do know how to do that pretty well. They're good at acting in that sense. Um, but they don't really want to do that. They'll never probably feel fully satisfied by pretending to be something that they're not because they're also a fixed sign and they do not adapt. So they want to do what they want to do. That's the end of it. They're stubborn. So thing about Scorpio, I would say they're a very intense sign. Their aura is very strong. Like a Scorpio rising person. Now, Scorpio rising seems actually to be quite a rare rising sign. Not many people, especially ones that I know, there is not many people with Scorpio rising. It's quite a rare sign to have as your rising sign. But a Scorpio rising, especially because the rising sign is your first house and it's what you're throwing out and projecting to the outside world when you first meet new people. So, because of that being what Ryzen is, Scorpio Ryzen, I would say especially, you're going to look very intense. You're going to look like a strong, intuitive person. Your eyes will be hypnotic, piercing, stare straight into someone's soul. Scorpios are the absolute masters of death stares and making you feel super uncomfortable with that. Um, yeah, so if that's your rising sign, you're going to have this especially. It's not going to be deep, it's going to be more on the surface only, because that's what the rising is. But you're going to look very sort of possessive, almost kind of very reserved, secretive. There's this mist to Pluto, which you're going to be showing people. You're going to look very attractive. You're going to attract the opposite sex very easily as well. But that's what you're going to be like. you're going to look like quite a driven, determined person. I would say Scorpio is probably one of the most determined and driven to be successful signs. They are definitely, and also because they are dignifying Mars as well, like Aries, they have the same energy and drive. They are very energetic physically, and they're very courageous too, but on a deeper level even than Aries because they're less put on a show because they're not fire, they're water, so they're a bit more, it's deeper in their core, not so much let's show off to the world at large. It's more let's feel it internally and use that as my motivation to keep going in life. They're very resilient too. They could have 100,000 million, setbacks in life, and they will still rise above it stronger than before. Now, obviously, the scorpion is their traditional animal representative, but the more highly evolved Scorpios can also be represented by the eagle or even the phoenix, as in they die by burning into flames because this is what phoenixes were meant to do in mythology, and then they are born again, they rise again from the ashes as a stronger, better, braver person. And this theme is kind of the power of the Scorpio when it's in its most highly evolved form. They are very, very powerful. Similar to Leo as well, they have this power complex. Pluto does want to control people, and Leo actually exalts Pluto, so they're similar in this way to Scorpio, but they're a lot more boisterous on the outside. They don't hide it. They're a lot less sneaky, but they exalt Pluto, so they're similar in that they also want control, similar to Saturn as well as a planet. Although Saturn's more in a strict, be serious way, and be careful in your life. Pluto's more in just control of the highest order sort of thing. But yeah, they have this too. Now, obviously, this if your sun is Scorpio, you're going to have your ego tied up with these Scorpio traits. You're going to embody them, and that's what's going to be the sun. The sun is not like overly comfortable in Scorpio because the sun is the ruler of Leo, and Scorpio is in a square to Leo, and they're also, fire versus water elements. So it's not the best place for the sun, but that's what you're going to have with that. It's definitely not the worst place for the sun, though. Now, the moon. Now, what's very interesting is that the moon is a water planet. It's the ruler of Cancer, but even though the Scorpio and the Cancer both have the water element in common, the ruler of Cancer, the moon, is actually fallen. In other words, dead in the sign of Scorpio. So what's really strange is that the moon hates being in Scorpio because despite them both being water element signs and planets, they do not get on because the moon is fallen in Scorpio. And this is another thing that I think would add to their sort of secretive, reserved nature as well, is that they're a deeply emotional person because they are a water sign like the others. But because their moon is fallen, they feel almost guilty about feeling so emotional. They do not let themselves express these emotions openly, definitely not very often anyway, most of them, and they kind of even shy away. So they feel these things deeply and intensely, and they're not scared of them. They're not scared of emotion, even like evil, dark emotions. They're not scared by them, especially if it's their own emotions. But they also don't allow themselves to feel them very often because they do. The moon falls, so they act quite cold and reserved. They don't let them. They kind of restrain their empathy because water signs are very caring and empathetic, but they kind of restrain their empathy more than the other water signs, and their compassion because the moon is fallen. They kind of deny themselves these feelings, which is quite strange because they are a water sign. But that probably adds also another layer or another dimension, if you like, to their secretive sort of stereotype and nature that they have as well. It is a stereotype. Not all Scorpios are like this. Some are very open and honest, but it's not that they lie. They never lie. It's just that they hold back a lot of what they really think from people, but not in a way that is deceptive. It's not lying as much as Neptune is. It's more honest, but it's more just can't be bothered to say how intensely they feel a certain thing, if you like. But it's more like they restrain and hold back on the expression of what they think, not so much that they're completely lying about what they think. So if you kind of get the difference, um, there they are more reliable than Pisces as well because of that, and they also don't want to change. So they're a lot more loyal. They're a lot more like they will be providers. They're very hard to get their trust, but once you've got their trust, they will not easily break it. They are very reliable. But even then, if you cross them, they are going to be vengeful and want revenge, at least for a short period of time. Uh, so the moon in Scorpio, honestly, is a terrible placement. The moon is fallen in that sign, even though they are both water elements and planets, it's still a very stressful placement for the moon to be in. So it's like all the emotions are felt intensely, but they're repressed and not allowed to express themselves because Scorpio is in the moon, stopping them from being expressed. So that's very strange. Um, so you're going to feel these Scorpio traits, but it's going to be on a more deeper internal level than if your Sun's Scorpio. It's going to be more intense and it's going to be more aggressive, but it's going to be much more hidden than the Sun Scorpio, and even more secretive, if that's even possible, than the Sun Scorpio, because the Moon is very private and internal. Um, so what else? Mercury in Scorpio. So Mercury in Scorpio is quite interesting because Scorpio obviously it's an opposition to Taurus. It's opposite to Taurus on the zodiac wheel. So Taurus is quite basic, quite simple. They're quite sort of basic in their needs and their wants from life. They want money, they want to be stable emotionally and financially, they want a good relationship. Scorpio, because they're the opposite, they are the opposite of basic, so they have very complex and complicated needs. As I said, I will do a series where I get into all these oppositions much more deeply after I finish the series going over all the signs' character traits. But yeah, because of that, Scorpios are very complicated. So Mercury and Scorpio, you're going to be quite like you're going to weigh each word that you say very carefully, the way you come across to others and communicate, and even the way you think, because that's also Mercury. It's going to be reserved. It's going to be like, you're constantly going to be thinking, should I express this? Should I not? Should I even be thinking this, or should I not? But it's not going to be slow in the expression, like literally, like it would if Mercury was in Taurus, but it's not basic like Mercury and Taurus. It's a very deep thought process behind every word that they express. And because they think so deeply about every single word they express, that is why it's so slow and reserved, I would say, in their manner of expressing. Venus in Scorpio. Now, again, Scorpio is ruled by Mars, which does correspondingly detriment, in other words, weaken Venus. So Venus in Scorpio is in a weakened position. So Venus in Scorpio is not the same as Aries. So it's not a very favorable position for your Venus to be in, if I'm being totally honest. But it's not dead. That would be in Virgo. So Venus and Scorpio, they're very intimate in relationships. They can be quite possessive of their partners. They want to kind of know where they are at all times. Again, not all of them. That is just a stereotype, but that could be quite apparent within a Venus Scorpio person, especially the male Venus Scorpio. I feel like because they're more sort of dominant already from this Pluto influence. Plus, they want this more control because they're masculine, in attitude. So yeah. Obviously, another big theme about Scorpio, and this is getting into Mars and Scorpio, but every personal planet placement in Scorpio is going to have this. Everyone knows this as well. They are very sexual. They are probably, Mars in Scorpio is probably the most sex addicted of any Mars sign, I would say. Of course, Mars in Aries, which is also my personal Mars placement, that also has Mars dignified as well. So that's also a very strong position for Mars. But that's more in terms, I think, of physical energy, meeting life challenges, being a pioneer in what you want to do in your life. Obviously, it's sexual, but it's more than just that. It's a bit more superficial too. It's like you want to do everything as a challenge. You want to do new things in life, coordinate new things because this is cardinal fire. Mars and Scorpio, I would say it's just as sexual, but it's more deep. It's not like sex for the sake of it. Mars and Scorpio is more like sex to feel intimately and deeply connected with a person, and it's also deeper, and that's because of Pluto rulership as well of Scorpio. So they do have a huge sex drive. I would say Aries and Scorpio, and then Capricorn, because Capricorn actually exalts, in other words, strengthens Mars. So Aries, Scorpio, and Capricorn, Mars, those three signs are the best placements for Mars, and they're the strongest placements for Mars in terms of sex drive, and also in terms of physical energy too, and courage, determination, technically all of that as well. So again, Mars and Scorpio, it is in its home sign, one of its home signs. So Mars is happy there. It's a very energetic sign. Another difference between like the Cancer and the Scorpio is that Cancer is more openly emotional, but because the moon's actually strong, whereas in Scorpio, despite the water being the same element, I mean, the moon's fallen, so they're not comfortable with expressing emotion. They're a lot more restrained. But another difference between those two is that Scorpio is more secretive and they're a lot more energetic, but they are a lot more confrontational. Like, if they are mad, they are more likely to come up to you straight, but they'll do it more in a secretive, vengeful way because of the Pluto placement. But they will be quite direct still because they have this Mars drive to them, which they have in common with Aries. And Cancer, actually, Mars is fallen. So Cancer and Scorpio basically kill each other's rulers if you think about it. So that's quite interesting. Um, but yeah, Mars fallen in Cancer, they're a lot more lazy. They're very passive aggressive. Scorpio, because Mars is actually dignified, they're stronger. They're much more openly aggressive, a lot more dominant, and speech as well with Mercury and Scorpio versus Mercury and Cancer. They deny their emotions more, even though they have the same intensity of them. But they're very more aggressive. They're very energetic. Scorpio people never feel tired very often, I don't think, because of course they have a very strong Mars placement. So yeah, that's that. And real world example, I'm sorry, I know I was going to explain that earlier, then I went off on a tangent, but I'll do it now. So, real world example, there's two sides to them. It's like when they are vengeful because you've pissed them off and they get that more evil side of them that they're starting to indulge and show you. With that side of them, they would represent in a real world example probably frozen water, so ice technically represent ice, also because they're the fixed water sign, the water is not moving, so or even flowing even. So obviously the solid of water, in other words, ice, is quite a fitting real world description of their character. But it's more when they're angry. And when they're just contented and happy and they're not angry, but because they're fixed, they're still always having this watery energy. In that case, I would say that they are representing just water in liquid form, but not moving like Cancer. So it's like a bottle of if you have a bottle of water and you're not drinking it, you're just leaving it on the side while you're working. You look at the water in the bottle and it's not moving much at all. It's just static water existing in liquid form. But the difference with Cancer is that Cancer is moving. It's more like a flood. Scorpio is just still water sitting in a bottle, and it doesn't move until obviously you pick up the bottle to go and drink it. That's when it's in its more happy, contented state, but it can thaw. Its heart can freeze, and then it can get very evil and vengeful when you piss them off, and that's represented in real world by ice, I would say, for the obvious symbolic reasons. So, yeah, thank you for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.